My name is Harper, and I am 34 years old. For my 34th birthday, my grandmother handed me a folded certified check for $75. 000 with a trembling hand. Before I could even thank her, my brother locked the door, trapped me against the wall, and screamed at me to hand it over. When I refused, he slapped me across the face so hard, my vision blurred. Hand it over, or I am calling the police. My sister-in-law sneered from the hallway. I managed to escape and drove straight to the bank. But when the private wealth manager scanned the check, his face went completely pale. "Mom," he whispered, "you need to call the authorities right now." Before I share exactly how I sent them all to federal prison, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you love seeing greedy family members get exactly what they deserve. The air inside my parents' upscale Boston estate always felt heavy. But tonight, it was absolutely suffocating. It was supposed to be a simple dinner to celebrate my 34th birthday. Down the hall in the grand dining room, my parents, Charles and Victoria, were entertaining their wealthy friends, clinking crystal champagne flutes and laughing loudly. I had slipped away from the noise to check on my grandmother, Beatrice. She is 84 years old, and for the past 6 months my family has insisted she is suffering from severe cognitive decline following a stroke. They keep her isolated in her dark mahogany conservatory at the back of the house, treating her like a fragile, mindless burden who cannot even formulate a basic sentence. I quietly pushed open the heavy glass doors of the conservatory. The room was dimly lit by a single reading lamp. Beatrice sat in her plush velvet wheelchair, staring blankly out the window into the dark gardens. The classical music playing softly from the hallway barely masked the tension radiating from the walls of this house. I walked over and gently placed a hand on her shoulder, expecting her to look at me with the same vacant expression she had shown everyone else all evening. Instead, something incredible happened. The moment my fingers touched her shoulder, her posture changed. The frail, confused old woman vanished. Beatrice turned to look at me, and her eyes were sharp, focused, and completely lucid. She checked the doorway behind me to ensure we were alone. Before I could ask how she was feeling, she reached into the inner pocket of her knitted shawl and pulled out a crisp, neatly folded piece of paper. She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was shocking. It was not the weak, trembling hold of a sick woman. It was urgent and desperate. She pressed the piece of paper directly into my palm and curled my fingers tightly around it. I looked down and slowly unfolded the slip. It was a certified bank check made out directly to me. Harper. My eyes scanned the numbers written in her familiar, elegant handwriting. 75 美元. 000. I gasped quietly, my heart instantly hammering against my ribs. I am an anti-money laundering compliance director by trade. I look at massive corporate accounts and trace complex financial anomalies all day for a living. I am used to dealing with huge sums of money that do not belong to me. But seeing a personal check for $75, 000, from a woman my family claimed could not even remember her own address, sent a cold shock wave straight down my spine. This was not right. Nothing about this situation made any logical sense. "Grandma, what is this?" I whispered, keeping my voice as low as possible so the guests in the dining room would not hear. I tried to hand it back to her. "You cannot give me this. Charles and Victoria monitor all your accounts. Marcus manages your entire portfolio. They will completely lose their minds if they see you writing checks." Beatrice refused to take it back. She pushed my hand away and leaned in close. Her breath was shallow, but her words were deliberate and terrifyingly clear. "Listen to me very carefully, Harper," she whispered. "I do not have much time before they come looking for you. You need to take this check Put it in your pocket right now. And do not let anyone in this house see it." I stared at her, paralyzed by the sudden shift in her demeanor. The woman sitting in front of me was not suffering from a stroke. She was terrified. I quickly folded the check and shoved it deep into the pocket of my blazer. "Tomorrow morning, you go straight to the private wealth branch downtown." Beatrice instructed, her voice dropping to a harsh, urgent rasp. "Do not go to any local branch. Go downtown. You find Mr. Sterling. He is the senior director. You hand this check directly to him. No one else. Do you understand me?" I nodded slowly, my mind racing through a dozen different terrifying scenarios. "Why Sterling?" I asked. "Why give me $75? 000 right now? What is actually going on here?" Beatrice looked toward the closed doors of the conservatory, her eyes darting back to me with raw panic. "Just take it to Sterling. He will know exactly what it means. And Harper, whatever you do, do not tell your parents. Do not tell your brother. Marcus, if they find out you have this, they will destroy you just to get it back. Run. Harper, when you get the chance tonight, just run." The sheer terror in her voice made my blood run cold. As a compliance investigator, my professional instincts immediately kicked into overdrive. A massive, unexpected sum of money handed over in secret. A specific bank director named as the only point of contact. A grandmother faking a debilitating medical condition while living under the strict, suffocating financial control of her son and grandson. The pieces were forming a very dark, very dangerous picture. I knew my brother Marcus had taken over as Beatrice's self-appointed investment manager last year. Marcus drove a brand new imported sports car and lived in a luxury high-rise despite having a mediocre track record in private equity. I opened my mouth to ask Beatrice exactly what Marcus was doing with her trust funds. I needed details. I needed to know exactly what kind of financial mess I was walking into before I took this check to the bank. But I never got the chance to ask. Before I could utter a single syllable, a heavy shadow fell across the frosted glass of the conservatory doors. The loud chatter from the dining room suddenly felt very far away. Someone was standing right outside the room listening to us. Beatrice instantly slumped back into her velvet wheelchair, her sharp gaze dissolving back into the vacant confused stare of an ailing patient. Her chin dropped to her chest, and her hands began to tremble artificially. The transformation was so fast and so flawless it took my breath away. I stood frozen in the center of the room, my hand instinctively dropping to cover the pocket where the $75,000 check was hidden. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own rapid breathing and the loud thudding of my pulse in my ears. I took a slow step backward, putting a safe distance between myself and my grandmother to make it look like I was just checking on her. Then the heavy brass handle began to rattle. It did not turn smoothly or politely. It rattled violently with aggressive, impatient force. Someone was grabbing the handle, twisting it hard, preparing to shove their way into the room and catch us. The wooden frame groaned loudly under the sudden weight of whoever was standing on the other side. My brother Marcus was notoriously impatient, and I knew exactly what was about to happen. The doors were about to fly open, and my family nightmare was officially about to begin. The heavy glass doors burst inward with a deafening crack. Marcus stood in the threshold. My older brother was wearing his custom-tailored Italian suit, his tie slightly loosened and his face twisted into an ugly mask of pure rage. He stepped into the dimly lit room and immediately reached behind him, turning the deadbolt with a sharp metallic click. The sound echoed in the quiet space, sealing us inside. "What do you have in your pocket, Harper?" he demanded. His voice was not the polished, charming tone he used out in the dining room with his wealthy clients. It was a guttural, venomous command, I kept my hands firmly at my sides, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I do not know what you are talking about," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I am just checking on Grandma. She looked lonely sitting in here all by herself. Do not play stupid with me." Marcus snarled, closing the distance between us in 3 long strides. He pointed an accusing finger directly at my face. I saw the shadow of the checkbook. I know exactly what the old woman just did. She is out of her mind. She is completely delusional. That money does not belong to you. That cash is strictly allocated for her managed trust. A trust that I oversee. My anti-money laundering instincts flared instantly. Private equity managers do not panic over a single check unless the underlying accounts are dangerously illiquid or hiding massive discrepancies. Legitimate trusts have buffers. Legitimate portfolios are transparent. Marcus was sweating. The vein in his neck was visibly pulsing. This was not the reaction of a responsible financial advisor protecting a client. This was the raw panic of a desperate man trying to plug a leaking dam. "If you are managing her trust so well, Marcus, 70 lime. 000 withdrawal should not send you into a complete meltdown," I challenged, standing my ground. "Unless, of course, the money is not actually where you say it is." Marcus's eyes widened with a mix of shock and unhinged fury. He grabbed me by the shoulders, slamming my back against the glass panes of the conservatory wall. The heavy glass rattled violently. "Give me the check right now," he screamed, his grip digging painfully into my skin. "She does not know what she is doing. She is a sick www.gobu.com confused old woman, and you are taking advantage of her rotting brain." I looked over at Beatrice. My grandmother had slumped entirely sideways in her wheelchair, her eyes squeezed shut, performing the role of a helpless, oblivious patient flawlessly. She was leaving this entirely up to me. I had to protect that piece of paper. It was the only tangible evidence I had. "Get your hands off me," I shouted, shoving my forearms hard against his chest to break his grip. "I am not giving you anything." Marcus lost whatever shred of control he had left. He drew his hand back and swung. The slap was brutal. His heavy palm struck the left side of my face with a sickening smack. The sheer force of the impact snapped my head to the side, throwing my equilibrium entirely off balance. I stumbled backward, my hip crashing hard against the edge of a heavy marble planter. A high-pitched ringing pierced my left ear, and the sharp metallic taste of copper instantly flooded my mouth. I touched my trembling fingers to my split lip, staring at my brother in absolute disbelief. He had just struck me. Before I could even process the physical shock, the deadbolt clicked again. The doors swung open and the suffocating tension in the room thickened. My sister-in-law Serena stepped effortlessly into the doorway. She looked immaculate, dressed in a sleek designer gown, her flawless makeup entirely undisturbed by the violence that had just occurred. Serena was a high-powered fine art appraiser and gallery director. Sharp, calculating, and completely ruthless. As a successful woman in the competitive luxury art market, she projected absolute authority. But behind closed doors, she used that same commanding presence to belittle anyone she deemed beneath her. Serena did not look horrified by the red mark spreading across my cheek. She did not ask if I was okay. Instead, she crossed her arms over her chest, planted her expensive heels firmly in the doorway to block my only exit, and let out a cold, mocking laugh. "You really should just hand it over, Harper." Serena sneered, looking me up and down with absolute disgust. "Look at yourself. A broke, glorified paper pusher. Still paying off student loans does not deserve a dime from this family. You think you are so smart with your little compliance degree. But you are nothing but a hired auditor. I wiped the blood from my lip, glaring at her. You have no idea what is going on here, Serena. Oh, I know exactly what is going on. She fired back, her voice dripping with venom. You are a jealous, pathetic failure who cannot stand watching your brother succeed. Marcus has built an empire. He handles millions. And you live in a cramped apartment, flagging transactions for other people's businesses. You are a loser, Harper. You always have been. Now reach into that cheap blazer of yours and give my husband the check. I straightened my posture, ignoring the throbbing pain in my jaw. No, I am taking this to the bank. Serena pulled her latest model smartphone from her designer clutch and held it up, her perfectly manicured fingers hovering over the screen. Give it up, or I am dialing the authorities right now to report you for elder theft, she threatened, her eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. I will tell the police. You manipulated a sick old woman into giving you her life savings. Who do you think they will believe? The successful investment manager and the prominent gallery director, or the struggling, desperate daughter trying to rob her own sick grandmother? You will be arrested before you even reach the end of the driveway. The threat was incredibly real. They had the social standing, the wealth, and the perfect family facade to make a false police report stick. They had already convinced the entire neighborhood and our parents that Beatrice was severely mentally compromised. If the police arrived right now, they would see a confused, elderly woman, a frantic manager claiming fraud, and a woman holding a massive, unexplained check. It was a perfectly laid trap constructed by two people who clearly had entirely too much practice manipulating the truth. I looked at Marcus, his chest heaving as he stood ready to physically assault me again. I looked at Serena, her thumb resting maliciously over the call button on her phone, ready to ruin my life and my professional career with a single false accusation. They thought they had me completely cornered. They thought my fear of confrontation and my lack of financial power would force me to submit just like it always had when we were growing up. But they severely underestimated the situation. They forgot that I analyze desperate financial criminals for a living. I know exactly how panicked fraudsters behave when their crimes are on the verge of exposure. I tightened my grip on the paper hidden safely in my pocket, preparing to do the only thing I could do. I did not cry. In the past, the stinging pain in my jaw and the terrifying hostility from my brother would have broken me. I would have collapsed, surrendered the check, and begged for forgiveness just to stop the conflict. But the woman standing in that conservatory was not the frightened little girl they used to bully. I was a professional who spent her days dismantling the lies of corrupt syndicates. And right now, the two people blocking my exit were nothing more than desperate criminals trying to cover their tracks. Marcus shifted his weight. His eyes locked on my pocket. He lunged forward, reaching out with both hands to grab me by the throat. Time seemed to slow down. I did not step back. Instead, I grabbed the heavy bronze sculpture resting next to my grandmother's reading chair. Using every ounce of strength I possessed, I swung my body weight behind it and shoved the heavy pedestal directly into Marcus's path. The solid bronze collided directly with his shins with a loud, sickening crack. Marcus let out a sudden howl of agonizing pain. His forward momentum carried him right over the heavy object, and he crashed hard onto the tile floor, clutching his legs and cursing fiercely. That gave me exactly 2 seconds. I spun toward the doorway where Serena was still blocking the exit. Herr Smook. Victoria's smile instantly dissolved into absolute shock. She opened her mouth to scream, holding her phone up like a shield. But I did not stop running. I lowered my shoulder, braced myself, and slammed my body forcefully against hers. Serena shrieked as the impact threw her off balance. Her expensive smartphone flew out of her hand. Shattering against the corridor floor, her stiletto heels twisted on the polished marble, and she crashed into the doorframe, desperately grabbing at my jacket to stop me. I ripped myself free from her clutching fingers, tearing the fabric of my lapel, and bolted out of the conservatory. I sprinted down the long, carpeted hallway of my parents' mansion. My pulse was pounding a frantic rhythm in my ears. Behind me, I could hear Marcus scrambling to his feet, his heavy footsteps thudding against the floor as he bellowed my name. "Get back here," he roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "Catch her. Do not let her out of the house." I rounded the corner into the grand foyer, slipping slightly on the imported rugs. The lavish birthday dinner was still happening just a few feet away in the formal dining room. The sudden commotion from the hallway caused the polite chatter and the clinking of crystal glasses to abruptly cease. A dozen wealthy, well-dressed guests turned their heads to stare at me. I knew I looked like a complete disaster. My hair was disheveled, my jacket was torn, and fresh blood from my split lip was smeared across my chin. Before I could reach the heavy double doors at the front entrance, my mother stepped directly into my path. Victoria was holding a glass of expensive champagne, her face a mask of absolute horror and fury. She did not look at my bleeding face. She did not ask if I was hurt. Her only concern was the spectacle I was making in front of her high society friends. "Harper, what on earth are you doing?" my mother hissed, her eyes darting nervously toward the dining room. She reached out and clamped her manicured hand tightly around my forearm, her nails digging into my skin. "Stop running around like a lunatic. You are ruining a perfectly good evening. People are staring at you. Let go of me, Mom," I demanded, my voice sharp and unwavering. I tried to pull my arm away, but her grip was surprisingly strong. Fueled by her desperate need to control the optics of the situation, "You are embarrassing this family," she whispered furiously, stepping closer to block the front door. "I do not know what kind of tantrum you are throwing this time, but you will march back down that hallway and apologize to your brother right now." I could hear Marcus sprinting down the corridor, his angry footsteps getting closer by the second. I had no time to explain the massive financial fraud to a woman who would blindly side with her golden son. I yanked my arm back with a violent jerk, breaking her hold. Some of her champagne sloshed over the rim of her glass, staining the pristine silk rug beneath our feet. My mother gasped in outrage, but I was already throwing my weight against the heavy front door. I burst out into the cool, damp night air. The sudden chill was a sharp shock to my system. My reliable 8-year-old hatchback was parked at the very end of the circular driveway, completely out of place among the rows of imported luxury sedans belonging to their guests. I sprinted down the driveway, my heels slapping loudly against the pavement. I dug my hand into my purse, blindly searching for my car keys. My fingers brushed against the metal just as I heard the front door of the mansion crash open behind me. "Harper!" Marcus screamed into the night. I reached my car, jammed the key into the lock, and threw the door open. I slid into the driver's seat, instantly slamming my hand down on the power lock button. All 4 doors locked with a reassuring click. Just a fraction of a second before Marcus slammed his body against the side of my vehicle. He beat his fists violently against my driver's side window. His face was contorted with unhinged animalistic rage, his features illuminated by the harsh glow of the outdoor security lights. He pounded on the glass so hard I feared it might shatter, screaming threats that verified every dark suspicion I had about his financial crimes. "Open this door right now." Marcus roared, his breath fogging up the glass. "If you take that check, I will destroy your life. I will bury you. You are dead to this family. Do you hear me? Open the door." I did not flinch. I did not look away. I stared right back at his sweating face through the smudged glass. My hands were perfectly steady as I pushed the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life. Marcus grabbed the door handle, yanking it frantically, screaming a string of vicious curses as he realized he had lost control of the situation. I shifted the car into reverse, stomped on the gas pedal, and the tires squealed against the asphalt. The sudden movement forced Marcus to jump back to avoid being pulled under the wheels. I whipped the steering wheel around, shifted into drive, and sped straight down the tree-lined street. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time and saw my brother standing alone in the middle of the driveway, shaking his fists at my receding taillights. I was safely away. The $75,000 check burning a hole in my pocket. And I knew exactly where I was going next. I drove for miles without a specific destination, letting the chaotic adrenaline slowly bleed out of my system. The glaring streetlights of the affluent suburbs eventually gave way to the towering steel and glass silhouettes of downtown Boston. I pulled into a brightly lit all-night parking garage, backed into a corner spot, and locked the doors. My grandmother had been very clear. I needed to go to the private wealth branch downtown tomorrow morning. I spent the remainder of the night sitting perfectly still in the driver's seat, my hand resting over the pocket that held the $75,000 check. Sleep was entirely impossible. My compliance auditor brain was already dissecting every interaction, every word my brother had screamed, and every panicked look my mother had thrown my way. They were hiding a massive financial crime. And this piece of paper was the key to exposing all of it. I watched the digital clock on my dashboard slowly tick forward. As the dark sky finally began to lighten into a pale, icy morning gray, I started the engine. The boutique private bank was an imposing fortress of polished marble and tinted windows, dominating a busy corner of the financial district. I parked on the street just as the city was waking up, clutching my purse tightly against my side. At exactly 8 in the morning, a security guard unlocked the heavy glass double doors. I was the very first person to step inside. The massive lobby was pristine and quiet, filled with the faint hum of air conditioning and the soft clicking of keyboards as the private associates prepared for their shifts. A young woman at the front reception desk looked up with a welcoming, highly trained corporate smile. She opened her mouth to greet me, but I did not break my stride. I walked right past her desk, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor with absolute purpose. "Excuse me, miss." The receptionist called out, her voice pitching up with sudden alarm. "You need to wait in the lounge. You cannot just go back there." I completely ignored her. I knew exactly how these flagship branches were laid out. The associates handled the daily requests, but the high-level directors occupied the glass-walled offices lining the back perimeter. I marched straight toward the largest corner office. A brushed metal plaque beside the heavy glass door read Senior Director William Sterling. This was the man my grandmother had specifically named. This was the man who held the answers. A security guard stepped into the hallway, raising a hand to intercept me. "Mom, this area is restricted. Do you have an appointment?" I sidestepped his outstretched arm with practiced agility and grabbed the heavy silver handle of the corner office door. I pushed it open and stepped inside before the guard could physically stop me. The office was immaculately organized. Sitting behind a massive mahogany desk was a man in his late 50s wearing a sharp, custom-fitted suit. He had distinguished silver hair and the authoritative posture of someone accustomed to unquestioned compliance. Mr. Sterling was in the middle of reviewing a stack of financial reports, a steaming cup of coffee resting near his elbow. He looked up, his brow furrowing in immediate irritation at the sudden intrusion. "Excuse me," Sterling said, his tone dripping with professional annoyance. "This office is private. If you need assistance with an account, you must speak with an associate in the main lounge. You cannot simply barge in here." The security guard appeared breathless in the doorway behind me. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry." The guard stammered. "She just walked right past the desk. I will escort her out immediately." I did not back down. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the folded piece of paper, and stepped directly up to the mahogany desk. "My grandmother told me to bring this directly to you," I said, my voice steady and commanding. "No one else. Just you." I slammed the $75,000 check flat onto the polished wood right on top of his financial reports. The loud smack echoed sharply in the quiet office. Sterling let out an exasperated sigh. Clearly preparing to lecture me about bank protocol and security procedures, he raised a hand to signal the guard to step inside and remove me. But before he gave the order, his eyes flicked down to the piece of paper resting on his desk. I watched his reaction with the trained, calculating gaze of a compliance investigator. I expected him to look at the massive dollar amount first, as most people do. I expected him to question my identity or ask for a matching deposit slip. I did not expect what actually happened. The professional annoyance completely vanished from Sterling's face in a fraction of a second. His jaw slackened. The color drained entirely from his cheeks, leaving his skin a sickly ashen pale. He leaned forward, his hands trembling slightly as he grabbed the edges of the check to pull it closer. He was not looking at the $75,000 amount. He was staring directly at the signature line. The silence in the office grew heavy and suffocating. Sterling's eyes darted rapidly across the ink, scanning the specific way the letters were formed, analyzing the exact routing number printed along the bottom edge. His breathing hitched shallow and erratic. He looked like a man who had just been handed a live, explosive device. "Mr. Sterling," the security guard asked uncertainly from the doorway, "do you want me to call the police?" "No," Sterling whispered. His voice was hoarse, entirely stripped of its former authority. He did not look away from the check. He swallowed hard, his chest heaving visibly as pure, unfiltered terror took over his features. "Leave us," Sterling commanded the guard, his tone shaking. "Close the door. Do not let anyone disturb us under any circumstances." The guard hesitated thoroughly, confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere, but he eventually stepped back and pulled the heavy glass door shut until it clicked securely into place. We were completely alone. Sterling slowly looked up at me. His eyes were wide with genuine fear. He looked at my torn jacket, my disheveled hair, and the dark, bruised split on my lip where my brother had struck me the night before. He recognized that I had fought a physical battle just to deliver this piece of paper to his desk. "You are Beatrice's granddaughter?" he asked, his voice barely a breath. "Yes," I replied, refusing to break eye contact. "My name is Harper. She told me to find you. She told me you would know exactly what this means." Sterling slumped back heavily into his expensive leather chair. Running a trembling hand across his face, he stared at the check again. Wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead, the polished, confident banking director was entirely gone, replaced by a man facing a monumental crisis. "You should not have brought this here," Sterling whispered, his voice laced with dread. "You have no idea what you have just walked into." "I know exactly what I walked into," I countered, keeping my posture rigid, despite the exhaustion clawing at my muscles. "I am an anti-money laundering compliance director. Mr. Sterling, my entire career is built on dismantling financial fraud and tracking missing assets. I know my brother Marcus is running a scheme. I know my grandmother is terrified and trapped inside her own house. What I do not know is why a prominent branch director at a major financial institution looks like he is about to have a heart attack over a $75,000 check. Sterling let out a shaky breath, running a hand through his silver hair. He picked up a heavy gold pen from his desk. Gripping it so tightly, his knuckles turned white. He tapped the tip of the pen against the top left corner of the paper lying between us. "Look at the account routing information," he instructed, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Read the entity name printed right above your grandmother's address." I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto the small, bold text. It did not say Beatrice's personal trust. It did not say anything related to the standard retirement portfolios my family openly discussed at holiday dinners. Instead, it read Zenith Holdings LLC. That is not her personal account. I stated my professional instincts, immediately categorizing the anomaly. That is a corporate entity. It is a shell company. Sterling corrected, his gaze darting toward the frosted glass of his office door, as if he expected Marcus to smash through it at any moment. Zenith Holdings was formed exactly 6 months ago. Your brother walked into this very office and presented a freshly minted power of attorney document. He claimed your grandmother was experiencing rapid cognitive decline after her stroke and needed immediate wealth management intervention. Marcus transferred a massive portion of Beatrice's liquid assets into this newly formed LLC under the guise of consolidating investments for tax purposes. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. 6 months ago was exactly when my parents started aggressively pushing the narrative that Beatrice was suffering from severe aphasia. The timing was a perfect calculated overlap. If Marcus has power of attorney and controls the shell company, why did my grandmother write this check? I asked, pointing to the paper. And more importantly, how did she even get her hands on the physical checkbook? Sterling leaned closer, his voice dropping an octave lower. Beatrice is not the silent invalid your brother pretends she is. 3 weeks before Marcus marched in here with those legal documents, your grandmother visited me privately. She brought her trust litigator, Arthur Vance. Beatrice suspected Marcus was planning to seize control of her finances. She knew Marcus was drowning in debt and desperate for cash. But Beatrice also knew that if she fought Marcus openly, your parents would blindly side with your brother and force Beatrice into a medical conservatorship. So Beatrice decided to play the long game. She let Marcus take the bait. She let Marcus set up the shell company. Sterling paused, picking up the check and holding it up to the desk lamp. The bright light illuminated the dark blue ink of my grandmother's signature. "Look closely at her name," Sterling said. I squinted at the cursive script. Beatrice had not signed her current legal name. She had signed using her maiden name, Beatrice Montgomery. It is a prearranged distress signal. Sterling revealed, his tone thick with anxiety. When Beatrice and Mr. Vance sat in this office, they established a fail-safe protocol. Beatrice secretly kept one checkbook linked to the Zenith Holdings account before Marcus locked everything down. Beatrice told me that if she ever presented a check drawn from this specific account signed with her maiden name, it meant she was in immediate physical danger, and the financial trap was ready to be sprung. It meant Marcus had crossed the line from simple mismanagement to active federal embezzlement. My breath caught in my throat. The gravity of the situation was staggering. My grandmother was not just a victim. She was a mastermind, orchestrating a massive sting operation against her own grandson. And she had chosen me to deliver the final blow. "How much has Marcus taken?" I demanded, my voice hardening. "Tell me the exact numbers." Sterling turned toward his dual monitors, quickly typing in a sequence of passwords. He pulled up a complex ledger and spun the screen so I could see the devastating reality. Your grandmother spent 50 years building an investment trust worth just over $6 million. Sterling explained, pointing to a rapidly declining graph on the screen. Over the past 6 months, Marcus has been slowly bleeding it dry. He is smart. I will give him that. He avoids triggering the automatic federal reporting thresholds by structuring the transactions. He moves money out of Zenith Holdings in batches of $8,000 or $9,000, transferring the funds into offshore accounts or wiring them directly to third-party vendors. I stared at the screen, my anti-money laundering background easily translating the fraudulent activity. Structuring is a classic smurfing technique used to clean dirty money. Marcus was siphoning off Beatrice's life savings right under everyone's noses, using his authority as a private equity manager to mask the theft as legitimate business investments. He has drained almost $3 million already. FamilyStory, pointing to the bottom line of the ledger. If he continues at this aggressive pace, the entire $6 million fund will be completely liquidated by the end of the year. Beatrice will be left with absolutely nothing. Your parents will be left with nothing. Marcus is destroying your entire family to line his own pockets. The sheer scale of the betrayal made my blood run cold. Marcus was not just arrogant and spoiled. He was a ruthless, calculating criminal who was actively stealing millions from his own flesh and blood to fund his lavish fake billionaire lifestyle. Before Sterling could even lift his hand to grab the sleek black desk phone and dial the federal authorities, a sudden explosive commotion erupted out in the main lounge. The heavy muffled thud of the bank front entrance flying open violently echoed through the thick frosted glass of the corner office. Sterling froze his hand, hovering just inches above the receiver. My professional training kicked in, analyzing the auditory cues before I even saw the physical threat. Sharp, angry footsteps stomped across the polished marble floor, moving with terrifying speed and unmistakable purpose. "We need to call the police right now." Sterling stammered, his eyes widening as a loud, aggressive voice demanded immediate attention from the terrified receptionist. Before I could agree, the heavy glass door of the director office was violently wrenched open. Slamming against the door, stopped with a deafening crash. Marcus stormed into the room. His face flushed a deep, violent shade of crimson. He was no longer trying to maintain his polished investment manager facade. He looked entirely unhinged, breathing heavily like a predator that had finally cornered its prey. And he was not alone. Right behind him, pushing past the stammering security guard, were my parents. Charles and Victoria marched into the executive office with identical expressions of righteous indignation and absolute fury. My mother was clutching her designer handbag so tightly, her knuckles were stark white. My father looked at me with a gaze so full of pure disgust, it felt like a physical blow to my chest. I instinctively took a step back, positioning myself strategically between Marcus and the mahogany desk, where the $75,000 check still lay exposed. "You are still on the family tracking app. You idiot." Marcus spat his eyes, locking instantly onto the folded piece of paper resting near Sterling's coffee cup. "I tracked your location the second I realized you actually had the nerve to come here. I told you I would destroy you if you tried to cash that." Charles stepped forward, shoving his way past Marcus to glare directly down at me. His voice was a low, dangerous rumble that commanded absolute submission. "Harper, you will hand over that check this instant. I cannot believe you would stoop this low. Sneaking into your sick grandmother's room in the middle of the night, manipulating a woman whose brain is literally damaged from a stroke just to line your own pockets. You are a disgrace to this family." Mr. Sterling stood up from his chair, his hands visibly shaking. But he attempted to assert his authority as the branch director. "Charles, please lower your voice. This is a secure financial institution. We are currently reviewing a highly sensitive transaction that Beatrice herself authorized." My mother let out a sharp theatrical gasp, clapping her hand over her chest, as if she had just been physically assaulted by the very idea. She turned her attention away from the private office and stepped deliberately back out into the open lounge. She knew exactly what she was doing. Victoria thrived on public spectacle. She used social pressure and public humiliation as her primary weapons of control. If she could not bully me in private, she would destroy my professional reputation in public. My own daughter is a thief. Victoria screamed, her shrill voice carrying effortlessly across the cavernous bank lobby. Every single associate stopped typing. Every high net worth client waiting in the lounge turned their heads to stare at the unfolding drama. Look at her, a grown woman, a so-called professional preying on a helpless, silent old woman who cannot even speak a full sentence. I stepped out of the office, refusing to cower behind Sterling. "Mom, stop this right now," I demanded, keeping my voice firm and authoritative. "You are making a massive scene, and you do not understand the financial reality of what is actually happening here." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Charles roared. Joining my mother in the center of the lounge, he pointed an accusatory finger right at my face, ensuring every bystander in the building knew exactly who the villain was supposed to be. "You have always been jealous of your brother. You have resented Marcus for years because he is successful, because he handles high-level equity funds while you just flag spreadsheets in a cubicle. So you decided to sabotage his hard work. You decided to rob your own grandmother just to spite the son who actually takes care of her." The sheer audacity of the gaslighting was staggering. They were standing in the middle of a private bank, screaming that I was the criminal, while Marcus stood right behind them, actively attempting to cover up a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. The clients in the lounge began whispering among themselves. A few people pulled out their phones, their eyes darting between my disheveled appearance and my impeccably dressed. Outraged parents, to an outside observer, the narrative was perfectly clear. I looked like a desperate, erratic woman who had just been caught red-handed committing elder abuse. Marcus stepped out of the office to join my parents, playing the role of the exhausted, responsible caretaker to absolute perfection. He sighed heavily, rubbing his temples as if my actions were causing him immense personal pain. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption," Marcus announced to the staring crowd, projecting his voice with practiced corporate charm. "My sister has been struggling with some severe emotional instability lately. She took advantage of our grandmother who suffered a massive stroke. We are just trying to handle this family tragedy privately before she commits a serious felony." The manipulation was flawless. He was weaponizing the stigma of mental instability against me, validating my parents' outrageous claims and painting himself as the heroic savior all at once. "She is not incapacitated," I shouted, my professional restraint finally breaking. I pointed directly at Marcus. "She is lucid and she is terrified of you. That check is a distress signal because you are draining her trust accounts into a shell company." My mother marched right up to me, invading my personal space. Her eyes were blazing with a manic unyielding loyalty to her golden child. "Shut your mouth, Harper," she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper meant only for me. "You are making a fool of yourself. Marcus is executing complex tax strategies that a simple compliance auditor like you could never comprehend. He is protecting our family wealth. You are just a bitter, ungrateful girl who wants to steal a silent old woman's money to pay off your pathetic debts." I stared at the woman who gave birth to me, feeling a final, irreparable fracture in my heart. Victoria and Charles did not care about the truth. They did not care about anti-money laundering protocols, routing numbers, or wire fraud. They were entirely willing to sacrifice me to brand me a criminal in front of dozens of witnesses just to protect the polished, affluent facade that Marcus provided for them. Sterling emerged from his office, clutching the $75. 000 checked tightly against his chest. He looked at the security guards who were now flanking the lobby doors, unsure of who they were supposed to detain. The tension in the air was absolute. My family had successfully cornered me in a public arena, attempting to use shame and intimidation to force my compliance. But as I looked at Marcus's smug, victorious smile, I knew they had made a fatal miscalculation. They had brought a fight about financial fraud into a bank. Assuming my fear of embarrassment would override my knowledge of the law, my mother took another aggressive step forward, her expensive perfume creating a suffocating cloud in the sterile bank lounge. "You have always been envious of Marcus." Victoria sneered, her voice carrying an edge of practiced theatricality designed to sway the onlookers. She gestured wildly toward my brother, who stood looking like a perfect, polished executive despite the chaos he had just caused. "Just because he drives an imported car and you drive an 8-year-old junker does not give you the right to sabotage his tax-saving investments for your grandmother. Do you have any idea how hard your brother works to secure our family legacy? You are trying to ruin him out of pure bitter spite." I stared at her, genuinely amazed by the sheer magnitude of her delusion. Tax-saving investments. The phrase was absolutely laughable. I looked around the lounge, making sure my voice was loud, clear, and perfectly steady. "Mom, transferring $6 million of liquid trust funds into a newly formed offshore shell company is not a tax-saving investment," I stated, enunciating every single syllable so the security guards and the bank associates could hear me perfectly. "It is a textbook layering technique used in money laundering. He is stripping Beatrice of her life savings to pay off his own massive personal debts. That sports car you are so proud of is financed by your own mother's stolen money." My father stepped in, his face purple with outrage. "That is a disgusting, baseless lie," Charles roared. "Marcus is an accredited equity partner. He is restructuring the portfolio to avoid heavy estate taxes. You are just a glorified paper pusher who cannot stand the fact that your brother makes more in a month than you make in a year. You have always tried to tear him down to make yourself feel better about your own pathetic life. You dropped out of our social circle. You refused to join the family firm. And now you show up here looking like a maniac to steal from a sick old woman." While my parents continued their loud, vitriolic character assassination, Marcus realized that screaming in a federal bank was a terrible strategy for a man actively committing financial fraud. He needed to de-escalate the public spectacle immediately before someone actually called the police and triggered an official inquiry. I watched him smoothly pivot, his face instantly transformed from a mask of violent rage into an expression of deep, exhausted sorrow. He turned his back on me and walked slowly toward the 2 armed security guards who were standing near the exit, observing the chaos with their hands resting cautiously on their radios. "Officers, I am so incredibly sorry for this disruption," Marcus said, his voice dropping into a smooth, comforting, and highly persuasive baritone. He raised his hands in a placating gesture, flashing them an apologetic, charming smile that he normally reserved for his wealthiest investors. "My sister is not well. She has been struggling with some very severe psychological episodes lately. We have been trying to get her the psychiatric help she desperately needs. But as you can see, she is prone to these sudden, erratic delusions. She truly believes these wild conspiracies about our family." The guards visibly relaxed their hands, moving away from their utility belts. Marcus was employing a classic manipulator tactic, isolating the target by establishing immediate rapport with the authority figures in the room. He looked the exact part of a successful, burdened caretaker. He was wearing a custom suit, a luxury watch, and a calm, to rational expression. I, on the other hand, was standing there with messy hair, a torn blazer, and a bleeding lip from where he had physically assaulted me the night before. To a total stranger. His carefully constructed narrative made complete logical sense. Our grandmother was recently diagnosed with severe cognitive failure following a stroke. Marcus continued shaking his head with practiced sadness. It has been a living nightmare for our family. She gets confused. She stares at the wall and sometimes she writes checks to people without understanding what she is doing or what the money represents. My sister here in her current mental state snuck into her room last night and convinced her to hand over $75. Ling ling ling. We are just trying to get that invalid check back before she commits a federal crime and ruins her own life. We just want to get her home safely so she can take her medication. My mother immediately picked up on Marcus's strategy and chimed in, adopting a faux maternal tone that made my stomach physically churn. It breaks my heart to see her like this, Victoria said, wiping a completely non-existent tear from her cheek for the benefit of the watching associates. Harper, please. Honey, stop this embarrassment right now. You are not an investigator tracking international criminals. You are just confused and exhausted. Come home with us right now before you force these nice security guards to arrest you for causing a disturbance. Marcus turned his attention back to Mr. Sterling, who was still standing paralyzed outside his office, clutching the check tightly against his chest. Mr. Sterling, I know this is highly irregular, Marcus said, his voice dripping with professional camaraderie as he approached the bank director. As Beatrice's legal power of attorney, I must formally request that you hand that canceled check back to me immediately. It is a product of elder exploitation by an unstable family member. I will be contacting our legal team this afternoon to handle my sister's medical hold. But for now, we just need to secure my grandmother's compromised assets. Hand it over and we will get out of your hair and let you return to your business. Sterling hesitated, his eyes darting frantically around the lounge. He looked at Marcus, then at my parents, and finally at me. He was a career banker, a man who survived in his industry by avoiding liability and minimizing public conflict. The pressure of the affluent family demanding compliance was immense, and Marcus was offering him a very easy foreign, quiet way out of a potentially explosive situation. But before Sterling could extend his shaking hand to return the physical evidence to my brother, I stepped directly between the bank director and Marcus. I did not raise my voice. I did not act erratic. I squared my shoulders, wiped the last drop of dried blood from my chin, and stood with the absolute cold certainty of a professional investigator who knew the federal banking laws far better than a fraudulent equity manager ever could. Mr. Sterling, I said, keeping my tone perfectly level and projecting my voice so the security guards could hear every single word. Under the Bank Secrecy Act and federal regulations regarding the financial exploitation of vulnerable adults, surrendering a flagged check to a suspected perpetrator of fraud makes you a direct accessory to money laundering. If you hand that piece of paper to my brother, I will ensure federal authorities hold you accountable for facilitating the theft of $6 million. Sterling snatched his hand back as if the paper had suddenly caught fire. He took 2 rapid steps backward, clutching the check firmly against his chest, completely retreating into the safety of his office, and away from Marcus. Marcus watched his easy exit vanish. The charming brother facade melted away, replaced by the venomous predator I had faced the night before. His jaw clenched so tightly the muscles visibly throbbed beneath his skin. He realized he could not smooth talk his way out of this lobby. He needed to use absolute force. Marcus unclasped the latches of his sleek leather briefcase, letting it fall open on a nearby glass courtesy table. He reached inside and aggressively yanked out 2 thick stapled legal documents, slamming them down on the glass surface. He pulled a silver fountain pen from his pocket and tossed it next to the papers. Let us drop the act, Harper, Marcus hissed, abandoning any pretense of a polite volume. His voice echoed harshly against the marble walls. You want to play hardball? Fine. We will play hardball. You are going to sign these right now. I glanced down at the bold, capitalized headings on the documents. The first was a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement forbidding me from discussing Beatrice's finances. Zenith Holdings, or Marcus's investment practices under penalty of massive financial ruin. The second document was a formal waiver of inheritance, permanently forfeiting any claim I might have to Beatrice's estate, effectively redirecting my entire portion straight back into Marcus's greedy hands. Sign them, Marcus commanded, leaning over the glass table with a predatory smirk. If you sign the waiver, sign the NDA, and tell Sterling to hand me that check. I will walk out of here and leave you alone. If you refuse, I will press formal criminal charges against you for aggravated assault. I stared at him, genuinely taken aback by his sheer audacity. Assault? I asked, my voice laced with icy disbelief. Marcus pointed directly at his own legs. You deliberately attacked me last night. You violently shoved a heavy bronze sculpture directly into my shins, causing physical injury before fleeing the scene of a crime. I have the medical documentation, and I have 2 eyewitnesses who will testify that you launched an unprovoked, vicious physical attack against me when I tried to stop you from robbing our grandmother. Charles and Victoria stepped up to flank my brother, forming a united, impenetrable wall of familial betrayal. My father crossed his arms, looking at me with pure disdain. You brought this on yourself, Harper. Charles growled. Marcus is offering you a highly generous way out. Take the deal. You sign those papers, you give your brother back his management funds, and we will not let you go to prison for battery and elder theft. My mother nodded, her eyes gleaming with toxic manipulation. We are trying to protect you from your destructive choices, Victoria added, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. You have no money for a defense attorney. You have no power here. Just sign the documents, surrender the check, and go back to your sad little apartment. It is the only way to save your future. I stood perfectly still in the center of the bank lounge, letting their vicious threats wash over me. For my entire life, I had craved their validation. I had desperately wanted my parents to look at me with the same pride and adoration they freely showered upon Marcus. But standing here watching them actively blackmail me to cover up a multi-million-dollar federal crime, the final illusion completely shattered. They were not misguided. They were not simply favoring the golden child. They were active, willing participants in my destruction. The icy realization settled deep into my bones, bringing with it a profound, absolute sense of liberation. I no longer feared their rejection because I finally understood that their approval was entirely worthless. I slowly reached out and picked up the thick stack of legal documents from the glass table. Marcus smirked his chest, puffing out with arrogant triumph. He thought he had won. He thought the threat of criminal charges and my parents' disappointment had finally broken my spirit. I looked Marcus dead in the eyes. Then, with slow, deliberate precision, I gripped the top of the stapled packets and ripped them straight down the middle. The crisp sound of tearing paper echoed in the silent lobby. Marcus's smug smile vanished. My mother gasped, taking a shocked step backward. I put the torn halves together and ripped them again, reducing my brother's meticulous legal blackmail into a handful of jagged, useless shreds. I dropped the destroyed documents directly at my mother's feet. The torn paper fluttered to the marble floor like dead leaves. You can take your fake assault charges and your fraudulent waivers and choke on them, I said, my voice ringing with absolute authority. You have no power over me anymore. I am not signing anything, and I am certainly not giving you this check. I turned my back on my stunned family and walked straight toward the director office. Sterling was still standing just inside his doorway, watching the entire exchange with wide, terrified eyes. I held out my hand. "Give me the check." "Mr. Sterling," I demanded, "if you surrender it to them, you go down with Marcus. You know exactly what a maiden name signature means. Hand it to me right now." Sterling hesitated for only a fraction of a second. The threat of federal prison outweighed his fear of my arrogant brother. With a trembling hand, Sterling stepped forward and placed the $75,000 check firmly into my palm. I slid the check safely back into my own pocket. Without looking back at my family, I turned and walked straight toward the bank exit. My heels clicked against the floor with powerful, rhythmic purpose. "Harper," my father bellowed, his voice cracking with rage, "if you walk out those doors, you are dead to this family." I pushed the heavy glass front doors open, stepping out into the bright, crisp morning air. I did not look back. I did not care. They thought I was running away, but they had absolutely no idea that I was heading straight home to my computer to trace every single stolen dollar and burn their entire fraudulent empire straight to the ground. I drove back to my apartment in complete silence. The chaotic noise of the bank lobby and my parents' vicious threats faded into the background, replaced by the humming of my car engine and the singular laser-focused objective forming in my mind. When I pulled into my designated parking spot, I did not feel a single ounce of sorrow for the family I had just left behind. I marched up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment, unlocked the deadbolt, and stepped inside. I locked the door securely behind me, tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter, and walked straight into my home office. My family had spent years mocking my career. Marcus loved to parade around at gallery dinners, calling himself a visionary equity partner while dismissing me as a broke, glorified paper pusher. My parents laughed at his jokes, genuinely believing that all I did was sit in a gray cubicle checking forms for basic compliance. I am an anti-money laundering investigator. I do not just look at forms. I hunt illicit funds down. I dismantle complex financial webs, trace hidden assets across international borders, and build airtight federal cases against white-collar criminals who think they are smarter than the system. And today, the criminal I was hunting was my own brother. I sat down in my ergonomic office chair and hit the power button on my computer tower. My dual monitors flickered to life, illuminating the dim room with a cool blue glow. I pulled the $75,000 check from my pocket, smoothing out the creases, and placed it flat on my desk directly beneath my desk lamp. I did not need access to Beatrice's personal bank accounts to figure out what Marcus was doing. I just needed a single thread to pull. And Marcus, in his arrogant desperation to bleed my grandmother dry, had handed me the perfect thread. I opened my specialized financial tracking software, a proprietary database that aggregates public corporate filings, routing data, and registered agent histories. I typed the 9-digit routing number and the corresponding account number printed at the bottom of the check into my system. Then I entered the name printed at the top left corner: Zenith Holdings, LLC. Marcus thought he was a financial genius, but he was incredibly sloppy. Amateurs always assume that forming a limited liability company automatically grants them absolute invisibility. They think throwing a few corporate layers over their stolen cash acts as an impenetrable shield. But compliance auditing relies on the fact that money always leaves a digital footprint. Always. Zenith Holdings, LLC was registered in Delaware, a state known for its business-friendly privacy laws. Marcus clearly chose Delaware, hoping to obscure the ownership records. However, He made his first massive mistake during the registration process. To maintain absolute control over the stolen funds, he listed himself as the sole managing member. He did not even bother to use a proxy or a registered agent service to hide his identity. His full legal name and his private office address were sitting right there in the open corporate registry. I leaned closer to the monitor, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I initiated a deep dive into the corporate filings associated with his office address. If Marcus was brazen enough to use his own name on the primary shell company, he was likely running a network of interconnected entities to move the stolen trust funds. I ran a cross-reference search looking for any other businesses registered to that exact same address or linked to his specific investment credentials within the last 6 months. The exact time frame since he established the fake medical narrative. The screen blinked, and a list of 5 different shell companies populated my secondary monitor. Horizon Ventures, Apex Strategies, Meridian Capital, Vanguard Holdings, Zenith Holdings LLC. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Marcus could not even be creative with his corporate naming conventions. He was just cycling through a textbook for words related to peaks and investments. It was almost insulting how lazy he was. I began tracing the transaction histories connected to the routing numbers associated with these 5 entities. In the anti-money laundering world, we look for a concept called structuring or smurfing. Criminals try to evade the reporting requirements set by the federal government by breaking large sums of stolen money into smaller paced actors, less suspicious transactions. Sterling had already confirmed that Marcus was moving funds out of Beatrice's trust accounts in batches of $8,000 and $9,000. I needed to see exactly where those specific batches were going after they hit the Delaware shell companies. The stolen money was flowing out of Beatrice's legitimate investment portfolio and dumping straight into Zenith Holdings. From there, Marcus was frantically shuffling the cash back and forth between the other 4 shell companies. He was executing dozens of meaningless transfers between Horizon, Apex, and Meridian, trying to create a chaotic financial maze that would confuse a standard auditor. He was layering the money, trying to wash off the scent of elder exploitation before he finally withdrew it for his own use. But an AML investigator does not get confused by layering. We just follow the exit points. I isolated the outgoing wire transfers from his web of fake companies. The data showed a distinct repetitive pattern. After bouncing around between the shell entities for a few weeks, massive sums of money were being funneled outward into 2 very specific directions. The first exit point was entirely predictable. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were being wired directly into offshore accounts located in Bermuda. These were high-yield, high-risk accounts, completely divorced from standard conservative trust planning. Marcus was gambling with my grandmother's life savings, desperately trying to generate massive personal returns to cover whatever hidden debts he had accumulated in his failing private equity firm. But it was the second exit point that made my blood run cold and set the stage for my ultimate revenge. I stared at the secondary exit point on my monitor, tracing the digital breadcrumbs Marcus had so carelessly left behind. In money laundering, we use a term called integration to describe moving illicit funds back into the legitimate economy. The goal of integration is distancing stolen money from its original source, making it nearly impossible to follow the trail. Marcus had certainly tried his best to layer Beatrice's trust funds. He pushed the money through those 5 Delaware shell companies, bouncing the cash back and forth. However, a fraudster can layer the money 1,000 times, but eventually they have to spend it. They must pull the cash out of the virtual world and bring it into the real world. That is where the system always catches them. I opened a new spreadsheet and began mapping the exact trajectory of the second exit point. Marcus was not just sending money to Bermuda. He was funneling massive streams of cash directly back into the domestic banking system. But he was not putting the money into a legitimate investment portfolio for our grandmother. He was routing the funds into a series of private high-yield checking accounts registered under his own personal Social Security number. The sheer volume of the transfers was breathtaking. I watched the numbers populate on my screen, transaction by transaction. Marcus was utilizing a classic structuring method, transferring the funds in precise increments to avoid triggering the automated currency transaction reports that banks are legally required to file. He thought he was outsmarting the system by flying just under the radar. What he did not realize was that repetitive transactions just beneath the reporting threshold trigger a different, much more dangerous alert called a suspicious activity report. He had essentially painted a giant glowing bullseye on his own financial records for any federal investigator who bothered to look, and I was looking very closely. Once I gained visibility into his personal expenditure accounts, the polished illusion of Marcus, the successful equity manager, completely shattered. My brother was not a financial prodigy. He was completely broke, drowning in a mountain of fabricated affluence. I pulled up the expense reports, my eyes narrowing as I documented his daily spending habits. The $75,000 check Beatrice had handed me was a drop in the bucket compared to what Marcus was burning through on a monthly basis. I categorized the outgoing payments, highlighting the sheer absurdity of his lifestyle. There were massive recurring auto loan payments to a luxury dealership in downtown Boston, the custom-imported sports car that my mother had bragged about. The one she claimed was the ultimate proof of his success was entirely funded by my grandmother's stolen trust money. There were exorbitant initiation fees and monthly dues paid to an elite members-only yacht club where Marcus took his clients to project an aura of established wealth. The spending did not stop there. The ledger was a grotesque display of unearned luxury. I saw thousands of dollars bleeding out to high-end tailors for custom Italian suits. There were massive charges at five-star restaurants and exclusive cocktail lounges. He was dropping thousands on a single dinner, treating his associates and my blindly enabling parents to lavish meals, all while using stolen funds. Every single time my father proudly boasted about Marcus picking up the check, Beatrice was the one actually footing the bill. The hypocrisy of the confrontation in the bank lobby suddenly tasted even more bitter. My parents had stood in front of a dozen strangers and screamed that I was a jealous, pathetic failure. They had humiliated me, claiming I resented Marcus because he worked hard and drove a luxury car. They had fully supported him as he threatened to have me arrested for elder abuse. Meanwhile, their golden child was actively committing federal wire fraud to finance the exact lifestyle they worshipped. I clicked the save button on my spreadsheet. Securing the growing mountain of evidence, the case for wire fraud was absolutely airtight. To secure a federal conviction for wire fraud, the prosecution only needs to prove two elements. First, the defendant devised a scheme to defraud someone of money or property. Second, the defendant used interstate wire communications to execute that scheme. Marcus had deliberately set up fraudulent shell companies to steal from an elderly woman, and he had used digital banking networks to move the stolen cash across state lines into his own pockets. It was a textbook felony carrying a maximum sentence of 20 years in federal prison for each transaction. I had documented over 40 separate structured transfers. Marcus was looking at a potential sentence that would keep him locked behind bars for the rest of his natural life. But as I continued to scrub the data, my eyes caught a peculiar anomaly. The personal spending, the cars, the suits, the yacht club memberships. None of it fully accounted for the massive drain on Beatrice's $6 million fund. Marcus was burning through cash at an alarming rate. But there were still millions of dollars missing from the overall ledger. The offshore accounts in Bermuda held a significant chunk, but there was a massive hole in the domestic transfers. I adjusted my search parameters, widening the scope of the investigation. If the money was not sitting in Marcus's personal accounts, and it had not been wired overseas, it had to be parked somewhere incredibly secure. Criminals who embezzle millions rarely leave the bulk of the cash sitting in liquid form. They turn it into hard assets. They buy things that appreciate in value, things that can be easily collateralized or sold later if they need to launder the money back into the legitimate market. I ran a reverse trace on the largest outgoing wire transfers from the Zenith Holdings Shell account. These were not the structured $9,000 payments. These were massive, bold six-figure wires that bypassed his personal accounts entirely. The data loaded on my second monitor, revealing a string of routing numbers that belonged to a commercial escrow account. The money was being funneled directly into the high-end art market, and the name registered to the receiving escrow account made the final devastating piece of the puzzle snap perfectly into place. The name glaring back at me from the commercial escrow account routing data was Vanguard Fine Arts. That was not a random holding firm or an anonymous offshore trust. That was the boutique luxury art gallery owned and operated entirely by my sister-in-law. Serena. I leaned back in my ergonomic office chair, letting the sheer magnitude of the betrayal wash over me. Marcus was not operating alone. He was not a lone wolf, desperately stealing from his grandmother to cover his own personal debts. This was a coordinated, highly sophisticated criminal enterprise, and Serena was up to her elbows in stolen cash. The fine art market has always been the ultimate playground for money launderers. Criminals love parking illicit funds in physical artwork because it immediately legitimizes the cash. Once dirty money is converted into a luxury painting or sculpture, the asset can be sold, stored in a free port, or leveraged effectively, washing the funds clean and bringing them back into the legal economy. Serena, with her prestigious appraisal license and access to commercial escrow accounts, provided the perfect washing machine for Marcus's embezzled millions. I opened a new tab on my browser and logged directly into the International Art Registry database. Azan Investigator. Pulling public auction records is second nature. I entered Serena's full legal name and gallery into the search bar, filtering the results to show only high-value acquisitions finalized within the last 6 months. The exact time frame since Marcus established the fake trust portfolio, the search results populated instantly, and the data was absolutely staggering. Serena had not just purchased one painting to hide the cash. She had gone on an absolute buying spree. I clicked on the first acquisition record. It was a rare modern abstract painting secured at a private auction in New York. The purchase price was listed at $1, 5 millions. The transaction history showed it was an all-cash offer, bypassing standard financing entirely. Criminals pay in cash because financial institutions ask too many questions when issuing a loan for speculative assets. The funding source listed on the closing documents matched the massive wire transfers I had just traced out of Beatrice's stolen trust accounts. I moved to the second acquisition. It was a massive bronze sculpture imported from Europe, purchased just 3 months ago for a staggering $2, 1 million. Again, it was an all-cash transaction completely funded by the illicit wires routed through Vanguard Fine Arts. The third item was a historic collection of vintage photography acquired for just under $800. Ling ling ling. Marcus was draining Beatrice's life savings, and Serena was immediately converting those stolen dollars into an untouchable fine art portfolio. But the most arrogant, infuriating detail of the entire operation was printed right there on the official registry documents. I zoomed in on the ownership section of the legal filings. The artworks were not listed under Beatrice's name. They were not held in a trust for the family. They were not even registered under Marcus's name. Every single piece was deeded exclusively to Serena's gallery holding company. She had completely isolated the assets, putting the stolen art solely under her own legal ownership. My mind flashed back to the horrific confrontation in the bank lobby just hours ago and the violent encounter in the conservatory the night before. I remembered Serena standing in the doorway blocking my exit. her flawless makeup and designer gown projecting an aura of absolute superiority. I remembered the vile, mocking tone of her voice as she looked down on me and called me a broke, glorified paper pusher. She had laughed in my face, threatening to call the police and ruin my life. All while standing on a mountain of my grandmother's stolen money. She felt entirely invincible because she believed she had successfully outsmarted the system. She thought her high society status and her gallery license made her untouchable. She assumed that a simple auditor like me would never possess the skills or the audacity to look behind the curtain of her glamorous life. She was dead wrong. By purchasing those artworks in her own name, using embezzled funds, Serena had elevated this entire situation from a simple case of elder financial abuse into a massive federal crime. She was actively receiving the proceeds of wire fraud and engaging in high-level money laundering. In the eyes of the federal government, this constituted a criminal conspiracy. It brought their entire operation directly under the jurisdiction of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Under RICO statutes, the federal government does not just arrest you. They seize everything you own. They freeze your bank accounts. They raid your galleries, and they seize every single asset connected to the illicit funds. Serena thought she was building a fine art empire, but she had actually just constructed her own federal prison sentence. I highlighted the acquisition records, the wire transfer logs, and the escrow account routing numbers, sending everything directly to my secure printer. The machine whirred to life, churning out page after page of undeniable, airtight evidence. I grabbed a thick black binder from my desk drawer and began meticulously assembling the compliance audit. I organized the documents chronologically, starting with Marcus's fraudulent power of attorney, moving through the structured bank withdrawals, the offshore wire transfers, and finally culminating in Serena's illicit art purchases. Every single page was a nail in their coffin. I meticulously tabbed the sections, ensuring that any federal agent could look at this binder and instantly understand the exact flow of the stolen money. The sheer scale of their greed was breathtaking. They were perfectly willing to let Beatrice rot in an isolated room, stripped of her dignity and her life savings, just so Serena could play the role of a powerful art director and Marcus could pretend to be an equity titan. This was no longer just a family dispute over inheritance. This was a fully documented trial-ready federal indictment wrapped in a single black binder. I placed the final summary page on top, closing the cover with a sharp, satisfying snap as I ran my hand over the smooth cover of the binder. My cell phone buzzed violently against the surface of my desk. The sudden vibration startled me in the quiet apartment, breaking the deep silence of my concentration. I glanced over at the glowing screen. A new text message had just arrived. The sender name illuminated the dark room and a grim, anticipatory smile crossed my face as I read the threatening words my brother had just sent me. The sender name flashing on my screen was Marcus. I picked up the phone, sliding my thumb across the glass to unlock it. The message was a masterclass in narcissistic manipulation designed to inflict maximum psychological damage while asserting absolute dominance. Family meeting tonight at 8. The text read, "Grandma is going to tell you to your face what a complete disgrace you are. Come beg for forgiveness, or you are dead to us." I stared at the glowing letters. In the past, a message like this would have sent me into a full-blown panic attack. The threat of being excommunicated from the family, combined with the terrifying prospect of a coordinated ambush in my parents' living room, would have crushed me. I would have spent hours crying, agonizing over how to defend myself against their relentless gaslighting. But as I sat in the cool glow of my dual monitors with a black binder full of federal evidence resting under my fingertips, I did not feel a single ounce of fear. I felt an overwhelming surge of icy, calculated anticipation. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter watching a predator walk blindly into a steel trap. Marcus was entirely predictable. He was orchestrating a kangaroo court. He intended to surround himself with my enabling parents and Serena to create an impenetrable wall of hostility. He was bringing Beatrice out of her isolated conservatory to use her as a prop, fully believing that our grandmother's feigned stroke recovery would allow Marcus to put words directly into the old woman's mouth. Marcus wanted to force me to my knees to make me surrender the $75,000 check under the crushing weight of public familial shame. He thought he was the ultimate puppet master. He had absolutely no idea that the puppet strings had been cut the moment I stepped into William Sterling's office this morning. I set the phone down next to the black binder. I did not text Marcus back. Silence is an investigator's sharpest weapon. It deprives the fraudster of the feedback loop they desperately need to gauge their control. Let him sweat. Let him wonder if his intimidation tactics were working. Instead, I reached for a business card I had printed out during my deep dive into Beatrice's financial history. It belonged to the only man who possessed the legal authority to drop the hammer on Marcus's entire operation. I dialed the number for Arthur Vance. Mr. Vance was not just a standard estate attorney. He was a veteran legal shark who specialized in high net worth asset protection and complex trust litigation. My grandmother had retained his services decades ago, specifically because Vance had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in the courtroom. If Sterling was the terrified banker caught in the crossfire, Vance was the apex predator waiting patiently in the deep water. The phone rang twice before a sharp, authoritative voice answered, "Vance Law. This is Arthur Vance." "Mr. Vance," I said, keeping my tone perfectly crisp and professional. "My name is Harper. I am Beatrice's granddaughter. I was at the private bank branch this morning. My grandmother handed me a check for $75. Ling, ling, ling. She signed the document using her maiden name, Beatrice Montgomery. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could practically hear the gears turning in the seasoned lawyer's mind. When he finally spoke, the standard professional courtesy had vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp, dangerous intensity. "Where are you right now, Harper?" Mr. Vance asked, his voice dropping into a low, commanding register. "Are you in a secure location? Is anyone from your family with you?" "I am alone in my apartment." I confirmed. "My doors are locked. I have the physical check in my possession." "Thank God." Vance breathed a heavy sigh of relief. "Beatrice took a massive risk handing that to you. We have been waiting for Marcus to make a fatal error. But Beatrice acting as the inside contact has kept me awake for the last 3 weeks. Sterling called me the second you walked out of the lounge this morning. He told me your family ambushed you. I need to know exactly what kind of financial data you have access to. Beatrice told me you were an auditor. But we need hard evidence of the embezzlement to trigger the federal freeze. I am an anti-money laundering compliance director." "Mr. Vance," I corrected him, feeling a surge of professional pride. "And you do not need to wait for hard evidence. I already built the entire case." I opened the summary page of my black binder and began delivering the findings with rapid-fire precision. I did not waste time with emotional fluff. I fed him the exact data points a federal prosecutor would need to secure a grand jury indictment. Marcus is utilizing a shell company called Zenith Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware. I explained, reading the figures directly from my monitor. He has drained approximately $3 million from Beatrice's primary trust accounts over the last 6 months. He is using classic structuring techniques, routing cash in batches, to evade automatic federal reporting thresholds. He is pushing the funds through 4 secondary shell entities to layer the transactions before filtering the money into his personal high-yield checking accounts to fund luxury auto loans and exorbitant personal expenses. Vance let out a low whistle. He is structuring. That alone is a federal crime. But that cannot account for the full $3 million. Where is the rest of the capital parked? That is the best part, I said, allowing a cold edge of satisfaction to creep into my voice. The bulk of the stolen money is not sitting in liquid accounts. It is being wired directly into commercial escrow accounts managed by Vanguard Fine Arts. That is the luxury art gallery owned entirely by my sister-in-law, Serena. She is actively laundering Beatrice's trust funds. She has purchased 3 high-end art collections in the last 6 months, entirely in cash, and she deeded every single piece exclusively under her own gallery holding company. A sharp, predatory laugh echoed through the phone speaker. Mr. Vance sounded like a man who had just been handed the winning lottery ticket. They put the laundered assets directly into their own names, Vance asked, sounding almost giddy with disbelief. They tied the wire fraud directly to a licensed gallery director, using stolen funds to buy physical art. Yes, I confirmed. I have the auction records, the wire transfer logs, and the corporate registry files completely documented and cross-referenced. I have a compliance audit sitting on my desk ready for the authorities. And Marcus just invited me to a family meeting at my parents' house tonight at 8. He wants to force me to sign a non-disclosure agreement and a waiver of inheritance. Do not sign a single thing. Vance ordered, his voice ringing with absolute lethal authority. You have handed me the exact ammunition I need to execute the federal sting. Beatrice's distress signal activated my legal authority to move A. But your compliance audit gives the feds the probable cause they need to act tonight. So, what is the play? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. The play is that you RSVP yes to your brother's little family meeting. Vance said, a dangerous smirk evident in his tone. You go to your parents' house tonight at 8. You walk right into the lion's den, Harper. You let them talk. You let them threaten you. You keep them entirely focused on you and that check. And what will you be doing? I asked. I will be making 3 very important phone calls. Vance replied smoothly. 1 to a federal judge, 1 to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and 1 to the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. You hold the room, Harper. I will bring the cavalry. We are going to burn Marcus's fraudulent empire to the ground tonight. I ended the call and set the phone down. The trap was set. My family wanted a public execution. I was going to give them one. The drive to my parents' house took exactly 40 minutes. I pulled into the sweeping circular driveway at exactly 5 minutes to 8. The sprawling estate was brilliantly illuminated by landscape lighting, casting long, dramatic shadows across the manicured lawns. I parked my 8-year-old hatchback directly behind Marcus's custom-imported sports car. The sleek vehicle gleamed under the security lights. Looking at it now, knowing that the leather seats and turbocharged engine were financed entirely by stolen trust funds. The vehicle looked less like a status symbol and more like a rolling piece of federal evidence. I grabbed my leather tote bag containing the black binder, took one final steadying breath, and stepped out into the crisp evening air. I walked up the wide stone steps and pushed open the heavy mahogany front door without knocking. The atmosphere inside the house hit me like a physical wall of suffocating smugness. Classical music drifted softly from the hidden surround sound speakers. The air smelled of expensive cedar wood and the rich, earthy notes of a high-end vintage wine. I walked slowly down the vaulted hallway and stepped into the expansive sunken living room. It was a perfectly staged tableau of unearned affluence. My parents, Charles and Victoria, were standing near the massive marble fireplace. They each held a crystal glass, swirling the dark red liquid with an air of absolute unbothered superiority. When I entered, they did not look relieved or concerned. They looked at me with the weary, patronizing expressions of royalty, tolerating a peasant who had finally come to beg for mercy. Victoria took a slow sip of her wine, her eyes scanning my simple professional blazer with open disdain. She clearly expected me to walk in crying. Shattered by the weight of their collective disapproval, I could see the subtle shift in her posture when she realized my face was entirely devoid of fear. Charles adjusted his expensive jacket, projecting the image of a disappointed patriarch, preparing to deliver a harsh but necessary punishment. They had spent the entire day convincing themselves that my actions at the bank were nothing more than a childish tantrum, a brief moment of hysterical rebellion that had now burned itself out. They fully believed I had driven over here to surrender the check and beg them to drop the fake assault charges. They thought they had won. Serena was sprawled comfortably across the length of the white leather sectional sofa. She looked like she owned the entire house, commanding the space with effortless toxic confidence. She was wearing a stunning emerald green silk blouse that contrasted beautifully with her flawless skin. She completely ignored my arrival at first, deliberately focusing all her attention on reviewing a glossy auction catalog. The sheer arrogance of her posture was breathtaking. She was sitting there actively laundering millions of dollars through her art gallery. Yet she projected the casual boredom of a queen, waiting for a peasant to apologize for breathing her air. She did not even bother to look up as my footsteps echoed against the hardwood floor. Marcus stood just behind the sofa, leaning against the backrest with his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He flashed me a chilling, victorious smile. He thought he had me entirely trapped. He thought his vicious text message had successfully intimidated me into absolute submission. His eyes immediately darted to the pockets of my jacket, searching for the folded slip of paper. He looked so incredibly pleased with himself, so utterly convinced of his own intellectual superiority. He had constructed a reality where he was the brilliant mastermind, and I was just the ugly, disposable problem child who needed to be crushed back into her proper place. He was practically vibrating with anticipation, waiting for me to fall to my knees. But the most disturbing part of the entire room was tucked away in the shadowy corner, deliberately positioned far from the warmth of the roaring fireplace. My grandmother Beatrice was confined to her plush velvet wheelchair. A thick, heavy blanket was tucked tightly around her legs, essentially trapping her in the seat. She was staring blankly at the beige wall, her jaw slack, her hands resting limply in her lap. She looked small, fragile, and utterly lost in the absolute depths of severe cognitive failure. The visual contrast between my vibrant, ruthless family celebrating their stolen wealth and the seemingly hollow shell of the woman whose money funded it all was physically nauseating. They were treating her like a piece of broken furniture, a convenient hostage paraded out to secure my compliance. They wanted me to look at her and feel an overwhelming sense of guilt. They wanted me to believe that my refusal to cooperate was somehow harming this helpless old woman. I knew it was a brilliant performance on her part. I knew her mind was as sharp as a steel trap, and that every vacant blink was carefully calculated to maintain her cover. But seeing her forced to play the victim, seeing my family actively exploit her supposed illness to justify their greed, ignited a fresh searing wave of fury in my chest. I tightened my grip on the handle of my leather tote bag. The heavy black binder inside felt like a loaded weapon. I stood perfectly still in the center of the living room, letting the silence stretch out until the discomfort became palpable. I did not break eye contact with Marcus. I did not flinch when Serena finally lowered her catalog and glared at me with absolute contempt. I was exactly where I needed to be, and the trap was perfectly primed. I took a slow, measured breath, readying myself for the inevitable onslaught of their manipulation. The countdown to their complete financial and personal destruction had officially begun right now. The silence in the living room stretched thick and heavy until Marcus finally broke it. He pushed himself off the back of the white leather sofa, straightening his designer tie with a sharp, arrogant tug. "I am glad you decided to be reasonable." "Harper," Marcus began, his voice dripping with condescension, I told Mom and Dad that you would eventually come to your senses. You always do. Now take the check out of your bag and place it on the table." I did not move. I just looked at him. My face a carefully blank slate. Serena scoffed, tossing her auction catalog onto the coffee table. She uncrossed her legs and leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me like I was something she had just scraped off her shoe. "Did you really think your little bank stunt would work?" Serena mocked, reciting the exact lines of a bully who believed she had already won the war. "We own this family finances. You are just the ugly duckling who could not cut it." She stood up, smoothing the silk of her emerald blouse, and began to pace slowly across the expensive Persian rug. "You walked into that bank this morning thinking you were some kind of hero trying to save a silent old woman, but you are completely out of your depth. Marcus and I handle multi-million-dollar transactions before you even wake up to commute to your little cubicle. We manage real wealth. We build empires out of nothing. And you are a nobody trying to play a game. You do not even begin to understand. Did you really think waving a single piece of paper around would undo months of meticulous legal structuring?" Serena paused, gesturing carelessly toward Beatrice in the corner. "Look at her. She does not even know what day it is. She is a walking liability. If Marcus had not stepped in to take control of her accounts, the state would have drained everything in medical fees and taxes. We are protecting the assets. We are the ones ensuring this family maintains its status. You should be thanking us instead of throwing pathetic tantrums in public spaces." Marcus nodded in fierce agreement, stepping up to stand beside his wife. They were a unified front of absolute greed and breathtaking arrogance. "Serena is entirely right," Marcus added, his chest puffing out with unearned pride. "I am the one keeping this family afloat. I am the one managing the investments, taking the risks, making the hard calls to secure our financial future. Do you have any idea the kind of pressure I am under to maintain our lifestyle? Of course, you do not. You just sit on the sidelines seething with jealousy because I am the success story and you are the disappointment. You saw an opportunity to steal $75,000 from a confused old mind. And you took it, hoping to finally get a piece of the pie you never earned." Marcus laughed, a harsh grating sound that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. "But you failed, Harper, just like you fail at everything else. You thought you could outsmart me at the bank. I am an equity manager. I control the narrative. I had those security guards eating out of the palm of my hand. No one is ever going to believe a hysterical broke auditor over a licensed financial professional. I hold the power of attorney. I hold the keys to the kingdom. Now give me the check, and maybe I will let you walk out of here without calling the cops." They were practically handing me a verbal confession on a silver platter. They were so blinded by their own narcissism, so entirely convinced of their invincibility, that they were openly bragging about seizing control of Beatrice's finances. They viewed my grandmother not as a human being, but as a bank vault they had successfully cracked. Before I could even formulate a response, my father stepped into the center of the room. Charles placed his crystal wine glass down on the mantelpiece with a sharp, angry clink. His face was set in a mask of rigid, unforgiving rage. He had listened to Marcus and Serena berate me. He had listened to them admit to financially controlling his own mother. And his only reaction was to nod in solemn agreement with their cruelty. "You have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, Harper," Charles declared, his voice echoing with absolute booming authority. "Your mother and I have spent the entire day discussing your disgusting behavior. We gave you every opportunity to be a productive, respectful member of this family, and you have thrown it all back in our faces." Victoria stepped up beside him, crossing her arms tightly. "You embarrassed us in public?" she hissed, her eyes flashing with pure malice. "You screamed like a lunatic in the middle of a bank lounge. You tried to ruin your brother's reputation over a petty, vindictive grudge just because you cannot afford a life like his. And because of that," Charles interrupted his tone, turning ice cold. "I called my lawyers this afternoon. You are officially cut out of the will. Every single cent. Every property. Every asset that your mother and I own will go exclusively to Marcus and Serena. You will not see a single dime of our money." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air, expecting me to shatter. He wanted me to fall to my knees and beg. He wanted me to cry and apologize for threatening their perfect financial ecosystem. "There is only one way you are walking out of this house tonight without me pressing charges for corporate espionage and theft," Charles demanded, pointing a rigid finger at the floor in front of Marcus. "You will hand that check to your brother. And then you will look him in the eye and apologize. You will apologize to Marcus. You will apologize to Serena. And you will apologize to your mother and me for your disgusting behavior. Do it now." I stood in the center of the room, clutching my leather tote bag. The final bridge had just been burned to ashes. My father had just disowned me to protect a son who was actively committing federal wire fraud. My mother had cheered him on. They had chosen their side with absolute unwavering finality. They did not care about the truth. They only cared about the illusion of their superiority. I looked at Charles, my face completely devoid of emotion. I looked at Victoria, who was waiting eagerly for my tears. I looked at Serena, who was smirking in triumph, and Marcus, who held his hand out expectantly for the check. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the absolute power of the black binder resting safely inside my bag. I did not fall to my knees. I did not shed a single tear over being cut out of a will that had just been used as a weapon against me. Instead, I unzipped the heavy brass closure of my leather tote bag. The sharp metallic sound cut through the silence of the living room like a knife. I reached inside, gripping the thick spine of the black binder I had meticulously assembled just hours ago. Marcus extended his hand further, his arrogant smirk returning. He assumed I was finally reaching for the $75. 000 check. He thought my silence was the ultimate sign of my submission. I pulled the compliance audit from my bag. I lifted it high and slammed it down onto the center of the glass coffee table with every ounce of force I could muster. The explosive crash echoed like a gunshot. The heavy crystal wine glasses on the table rattled violently against the glass surface. My mother jumped back with a startled shriek. Clutching her chest, Marcus snatched his hand away as if he had been burned. "What is this garbage?" Marcus demanded, his voice cracking slightly, the first genuine hint of uncertainty bleeding through his polished facade. "That is your entire life burning to the ground," I stated, my voice echoing with pure, unfiltered authority. I did not come here to apologize. "Marcus, I came here to deliver your federal indictment." I flipped open the heavy black cover. The first page displayed a massive, undeniable flowchart tracking every single stolen dollar. I looked directly into my brother's widening eyes. "You love calling me a glorified paper pusher." I continued stepping around the table to stand directly in his space. "Let us do some math. Investment manager. 6 months ago, you marched into Mr. Sterling's bank and forged a power of attorney. You set up a shell company in Delaware called Zenith Holdings LLC. From there, you created a web of meaningless corporate entities: Horizon Ventures, Apex Strategies, Meridian Capital, Vanguard Holdings. You thought using a textbook for investment names made you a financial genius? It just made you a predictable amateur." My father stepped forward, his face red. "Harper, Stop this nonsense right now. I held up a hand, silencing him instantly. I am not finished. Charles, you want to know how your golden son affords his lifestyle? Let me tell you. Marcus has been systematically draining Beatrice's $6 million trust fund. He is using a technique called structuring moving cash in exact increments to evade federal currency reporting thresholds. He is terrified of triggering an automatic flag. But his repetitive withdrawals generated a massive suspicious activity report. Marcus's jaw actually dropped. The color completely vanished from his face, leaving his skin a sickly, chalky white. He stumbled backward, his knees hitting the edge of the white leather sofa. He looked like a man watching an oncoming train. He took Beatrice's money and wired hundreds of thousands into high-risk offshore accounts in Bermuda. I practically growled, slamming my finger against a highlighted bank statement in the binder. The rest of the cash went straight into his personal high-yield checking accounts. That custom-imported car in the driveway, stolen money. The Italian suits, stolen money. The yacht club where you show him off to your friends. All of it was bought with blood money stolen directly from the woman sitting in the corner of this room. My mother gasped, looking frantically between me and Marcus. Marcus! Tell her she is lying, Victoria pleaded, her voice shaking. Tell her this is a mistake. Marcus could not speak. His chest was heaving, his eyes darting wildly around the room as the undeniable proof of his federal wire fraud sat exposed on the table. But I was not done. I turned my attention away from my hyperventilating brother and locked my gaze entirely onto my sister-in-law. Serena was still sitting on the sofa, but her previous posture of regal superiority had completely evaporated. She was clutching her emerald silk blouse, her dark eyes wide with sudden gripping terror. You thought you were untouchable. Serena, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously calm whisper. You thought you could hide behind your luxury gallery license and laugh at me while helping your husband commit a felony. You are not just a bystander. You are the washing machine. Serena swallowed hard, shaking her head. I do not know what you are talking about. I run a legitimate gallery. Oh. Vanguard Fine Arts is a money laundering front, I declared, flipping to the final devastating section of the binder. You used commercial escrow accounts to funnel Beatrice's stolen trust funds straight into the high-end art market. You wanted to clean the dirty cash. So you went on a shopping spree. Would you like me to read the acquisitions for the room? Serena opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Let us start with the rare modern abstract painting in New York. I recited flawlessly from memory, my eyes piercing right through her. $1.5 million paid in full, all cash offer. Then there is the massive bronze sculpture imported from Europe, $2.1 million, all cash. And let us not forget the historic collection of vintage photography for $800,000, all cash. All funded by illicit wires from Zenith Holdings. The sheer silence in the living room was absolute. My parents were paralyzed, their mouths hanging open in horror as the true scale of the criminal enterprise was laid bare before them. But the best part, Serena, the part that proves exactly how arrogant and greedy you truly are, is the ownership records. I continued leaning down until my face was only inches from hers. You did not put those artworks in a trust. You did not even put Marcus's name on the deeds. You registered every single one of those stolen pieces exclusively under your own gallery holding company. You tied the embezzled funds directly to your own gallery license. Serena let out a strangled, breathless gasp. Her hands began to shake violently. All the beautiful glowing color drained completely from her face, leaving her looking hollow and sick. By receiving the proceeds of federal wire fraud and converting them into high-end art, you have triggered the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. I explained, delivering the killing blow with absolute clinical precision. Under RICO statutes, the federal government will not just arrest you, they will freeze your gallery accounts, strip your appraisal license, and seize every single piece of art you own. You built your entire luxury empire with stolen money. And now the federal government is going to take it all away. You are going to lose everything. Serena. Absolutely everything. Serena buried her face in her hands, letting out a sharp, panicked sob. The fierce, mocking woman who had blocked my exit and threatened to call the police on me last night was completely broken, reduced to a trembling, terrified mess on the white leather sofa. Marcus finally found his voice. It was a weak, pathetic croak. "You cannot prove this," he stammered, stepping toward the table with a shaking hand. "I am taking this binder. You hacked my private files. That is illegal." I laughed, a harsh, victorious sound that cut through his desperate delusion. "You really think this is the only copy?" "Marcus," I mocked, stepping back from the table. "I am an AML investigator. I secured the data on 3 separate encrypted cloud servers before I even left my apartment. I have digital trails, IP logs, and verified routing numbers. It is a fully documented trial, ready federal indictment. You cannot destroy the evidence because the evidence is already everywhere." The reality of their absolute destruction finally settled over the room. Marcus collapsed onto the arm of the sofa, clutching his head. Serena was openly weeping. My parents stood frozen, their perfect world completely shattered by the undeniable weight of the audit document. I held all the power, and they finally knew it. Or so I thought. I had critically underestimated the bottomless depths of my parents' toxic delusion. For a normal, rational human being, a comprehensive compliance audit, complete with bank routing numbers and auction records, would be absolute, undeniable proof of a crime. But Victoria and Charles were not rational people. They had spent the last 3 decades meticulously constructing a flawless upper-class reality where Marcus was the undisputed golden child. Acknowledging that he was a federal criminal meant acknowledging that their entire parenting philosophy was a catastrophic failure, and my mother would literally rather watch the world burn than admit she was wrong. Victoria violently broke the heavy silence. She stepped away from my father, of her chest, heaving as she pointed a shaking finger at the black binder resting on the glass table. "This is a complete fabrication." Victoria shrieked. Her voice echoed off the high ceilings, sharp and desperate. "You made all of this up? Harper, you sat in your sad little apartment, and you printed out fake spreadsheets just to frame your own brother." I stared at her, genuinely astounded by the sheer velocity of her denial. "Mom, the wire transfer logs are certified public records," I replied, keeping my voice dangerously calm. "You cannot fake a fine art registry filed with international auction houses. I do not care about your fake documents," Victoria yelled, stepping closer and waving her hands frantically in the air. "You have always been insanely jealous of Marcus. You could never handle the fact that he is charming, successful, and married to a beautiful woman. You have been plotting to destroy him out of pure spite since the day he bought his first sports car. You are a sick, vindictive girl who cannot stand to see anyone else happy." Charles quickly rallied behind his wife. My father had always enabled my mother's worst impulses, and right now he was actively choosing to bury his head in the sand. He refused to even look down at the binder on the coffee table. He puffed out his chest, stepping in front of Marcus as if shielding him from a physical threat. "Your mother is absolutely right," Charles barked, his face twisting into a mask of pure indignation. "You hacked into your brother's private investment files and manipulated the data to create a false narrative, That is corporate espionage. Harper, that is cyberterrorism. I almost laughed out loud at his ridiculous choice of words. Cyberterrorism. Dad, I used a public corporate registry database. He listed himself as the sole managing member of a money laundering shell company. It took me less than 5 minutes to find it because your genius son is a lazy amateur. Shut your mouth, Charles roared, taking an aggressive step toward me. You are not a federal agent. You are just a bitter auditor who crossed a massive legal line. I am calling the police right now. I am going to have you arrested for hacking into a private equity firm. I will personally ensure the state board strips you of your compliance credentials. You will never work in the financial sector again. I will make sure you spend the next 10 years in a prison cell for trying to extort your own family. I watched them double down on their toxic reality, and any lingering shred of hope I had for my family evaporated. They were willing to sacrifice my freedom and my professional reputation just to keep pretending their son was a respectable businessman. They were willing to let my grandmother die penniless to maintain their yacht club status. The realization settled over me like a heavy, suffocating blanket of ice. Serena continued to sob quietly on the sofa, her hands covering her face because she knew the truth. She knew the auction records were real. But Marcus was watching our parents with a newfound desperate glimmer of hope. Marcus fed off their aggressive denial. He realized that as long as Charles and Victoria were willing to blindly reject the evidence, he still had a microscopic window of opportunity to eliminate the immediate threat. He knew I had digital backups. He knew the cloud servers were secure. But in his panicked, adrenaline-fueled state, logic completely abandoned him. All he saw was the physical black binder sitting on the table and the sister who had dared to challenge his authority standing just a few feet away. I saw his eyes shift. I recognized the dangerous predatory tightening of his jaw and the way his shoulders dropped as he braced his weight. His expensive suit jacket strained across his back. Marcus was completely unhinged. The charm was gone. The fake equity manager persona was entirely erased. He was just a violent, cornered animal preparing to strike his prey. Marcus let out a primal, furious scream. He lunged across the space between the sofa and the coffee table, his expensive dress shoes slipping slightly on the rug. He did not go for the binder. He came directly for me, his hands curled into tight, heavy fists, and his face was twisted into a grotesque mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He intended to beat me unconscious right there on the living room floor, fully believing our parents would stand by and let him do it. I braced myself, my muscles tensing as I prepared to dodge his incoming assault. He crossed the distance in a fraction of a second, his arm pulling back to deliver a devastating blow to my head. He was mere inches away. I could literally feel the air displacement from his fist swinging toward my face. And then the sound tore through the house. It was not a polite ring of the doorbell. It was a heavy, thunderous, authoritative pounding against the solid mahogany of the front door. The sheer force of the knocks echoed down the vaulted hallway and reverberated through the floorboards of the sunken living room. It was a rhythmic, commanding series of strikes that demanded absolute, immediate compliance. Marcus froze in midair. His fist stopped mere inches from my jaw. The sudden, explosive noise completely shattered his violent momentum. My mother shrieked, clutching her chest again. My father spun around, staring down the hallway toward the foyer with wide, startled eyes. Serena stopped crying, dropping her hands from her face to stare toward the entrance in pure, paralyzed terror. The pounding came again. Louder, harder, unforgiving. The heavy pounding echoed again, rattling the expensive artwork hanging on the foyer walls. Charles finally broke his paralyzed stance. He smoothed the lapels of his designer jacket, adopting his usual mask of suburban authority, and marched down the hallway, He fully intended to yell at whoever had the audacity to disturb his home at this hour. I remained standing perfectly still, watching from the living room as my father yanked the front door open. Charles opened his mouth to deliver a scathing reprimand, but the words died instantly in his throat. Stepping across the threshold was a man who commanded absolute, undeniable authority. Mr. Vance wore a pristine charcoal suit carrying a worn leather briefcase that looked like it had dismantled countless corporate empires. His silver hair was perfectly combed, and his piercing gray eyes immediately scanned the foyer with the calculating precision of a seasoned predator. He did not wait for an invitation. He simply walked into the house, forcing my father to step backward. But Mr. Vance was not alone. Filing in directly behind him were 4 individuals who completely shattered the polished, wealthy illusion of my parents' home. 3 men wore dark utilitarian windbreakers with bold yellow lettering across the back, spelling out FBI. They moved with coordinated tactical efficiency, fanning out into the hallway and establishing immediate control over the space. The 4th person was a stern-looking woman in a sharp navy blazer holding a thick stack of official federal folders. The silver badge clipped to her belt identified her as a lead investigator for the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. My mother let out a strangled gasp, dropping her wine glass onto the plush carpet. The crystal shattered, splashing dark red stains across the white fibers. Victoria stumbled backward, pressing her hands over her mouth in sheer terror. Serena shrank down into the cushions of the leather sofa, pulling her knees to her chest, her arrogant facade completely dissolving into a state of visible trembling panic. "What is the meaning of this?" Charles finally stammered, his voice stripped of all its former booming power. "Who are you people? And how dare you force your way into my home? I demand you leave immediately or I will call the police." One of the FBI agents stepped forward, flashing his credentials directly in my father's face. "We are the police. Sir, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant to secure these premises and all individuals present. I suggest you remain completely silent and let the attorney speak." Mr. Vance ignored my parents entirely. He walked smoothly into the sunken living room, his sharp gaze bypassing Marcus and landing directly on me. He offered me a curt, respectful nod. "Good evening, Harper," Mr. Vance said, his voice projecting a calm, lethal confidence that filled the massive room. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but securing federal warrants requires a certain level of theatricality. You held the room perfectly." Marcus stood frozen near the coffee table, his fists had uncurled and his arms hung limply at his sides. He looked back and forth between the federal agents and the trust litigator, his mind desperately trying to process the catastrophic collapse of his reality. He took a shaky step forward, attempting to summon his fake investment manager persona one last time. "I am Marcus," he announced, his voice cracking noticeably. "I hold the legal power of attorney for my grandmother, Beatrice. I am the sole manager of her financial trust. Whatever you think is going on here, I have the absolute authority to handle it. I demand you direct all inquiries to my legal counsel." Mr. Vance turned slowly to face my brother. The lawyer's expression was devoid of any warmth or professional courtesy. He looked at Marcus the way one might look at a particularly unpleasant insect. "You do not have a legal team that can save you from this," Mr. Vance stated flatly, "and your power of attorney was rendered entirely null and void the moment you committed federal wire fraud." Marcus swallowed hard sweat beading on his forehead. "I have not committed any fraud. Every transfer was a legitimate tax strategy. I was protecting the assets. That is a fascinating defense," Mr. Vance replied smoothly, setting his leather briefcase down right next to my black binder on the coffee table. "However, you seem to have fundamentally misunderstood the events of this morning. You thought Harper intercepting a $75 000 check was a random act of theft, you thought she was a desperate, jealous sister trying to steal from a confused old woman. Vance unclasped his briefcase and pulled out a high-resolution printed copy of the exact check I had carried to the bank. He held it up for Marcus, Serena, and my parents to see. This check was never a gift. Mr. Vance revealed his voice, slicing through the tense air like a scalpel. And it was certainly never a mistake caused by a stroke. This piece of paper was a highly calibrated, custom-designed piece of federal bait. The color drained completely from Marcus's face. His eyes locked onto the printed image of the check, specifically staring at the maiden name signature beneath Beatrice's address. When you marched into the bank lounge this morning, Vance explained with ruthless clarity, you did exactly what we needed you to do, by demanding that Mr. Sterling hand the check over to you, and by publicly asserting your absolute control over the Zenith Holdings account in front of federal bank cameras and sworn security personnel. You legally and physically tied yourself directly to a fraudulent shell company. You claimed ownership of an illicit entity used for money laundering. My mother let out a quiet, terrified whimper, finally realizing the inescapable magnitude of the trap her golden child had walked right into. We knew you were structuring withdrawals. The IRS investigator stepped forward, taking over the explanation with cold bureaucratic precision. We knew you were transferring funds just under the reporting threshold. But federal prosecutors need concrete proof that the individual executing the digital transfers is the same person claiming physical authority over the stolen assets. You gave us that proof on a silver platter this morning. Your public confrontation at the bank provided the exact probable cause required to authorize a sweeping federal mandate. Marcus stumbled backward, his legs hitting the edge of the sofa. He dropped down next to Serena, gasping for air as the reality of his situation crushed the last remaining breath from his lungs. What does that mean? Charles asked, his voice barely a whisper, looking at the IRS agent with wide, fearful eyes. It means the trap snapped shut an hour ago. Mr. Vance answered, turning back to my father. A federal judge signed the emergency injunctions this afternoon. As of this exact moment, every single bank account registered to your son is completely frozen. The offshore accounts in Bermuda have been flagged by international authorities. Furthermore, the commercial escrow accounts linked to Vanguard Fine Arts have been seized by the federal government. Serena let out a sharp, agonizing cry, clutching her stomach, as the mention of her art gallery confirmed her absolute destruction. You have zero access to liquid capital, Vance concluded, looking down at Marcus with pure disdain. You cannot move a single cent. You cannot hire a defense attorney with stolen money. The game is entirely over. You took the bait and you swallowed the hook. The suffocating silence that followed Mr. Vance's declaration was broken by a sound that completely defied the reality my parents had constructed. It was a sharp metallic click, followed by the distinct rustle of heavy fabric. Everyone in the living room instinctively turned their heads toward the shadowy corner where my grandmother had been parked like a discarded piece of furniture. The thick blanket that had been tightly tucked around Beatrice's legs was suddenly thrown to the floor. The swift, aggressive movement startled my mother so badly, she let out a short, high-pitched gasp. We all watched in absolute paralyzed disbelief as Beatrice gripped the armrests of her plush velvet wheelchair. She did not tremble. She did not struggle. With a fluid, powerful motion that belied her 84 years, my grandmother pushed herself up and stood perfectly straight. The hunched, fragile posture of a severely cognitively impaired elder vanished instantly. She rolled her shoulders back, expanding her chest, and took a slow, deliberate step forward into the bright illumination of the living room overhead lights. Her eyes, which had spent the last 6 months staring blankly at walls and floors, were now blazing with a sharp, lethal glare that commanded absolute submission from everyone in the room. "Mom," Charles whispered, his voice trembling with sheer shock. He took a hesitant step toward his mother, reaching out a shaking hand. "What are you doing? You need to sit down. You are going to hurt yourself." Beatrice did not even look at her son. She swatted Charles's outstretched hand away with a violent, dismissive swipe. "Do not touch me," Beatrice commanded. Her voice was a crisp, resonant tone, entirely stripped of the raspy, confused weakness she had been feigning for months. It was the voice of the ruthless corporate executive who had built a $6 million empire from scratch. Marcus shrank back against the white leather sofa, instinctively pressing himself closer to Serena. His jaw hung open. He looked back and forth between Mr. Vance and the imposing figure of his grandmother, his mind utterly incapable of processing the monumental deception that had just been revealed. "You are not sick." Marcus stammered, his eyes wide with a horrific realization. "You remember everything. I remember absolutely every single detail," Beatrice replied, taking another slow, measured step toward her grandson. "I remember exactly what day it is. I remember every single dollar I earned. And I remember exactly what it felt like to sit in that wheelchair for 6 agonizing months, listening to my own flesh and blood openly plot to strip my accounts bare." Victoria pressed her hands against her cheeks, shaking her head frantically. "This cannot be real," she murmured. "The doctors diagnosed you. We saw the medical reports. We watched you lose your ability to speak. You saw exactly what I paid the absolute best private neurologists in the state to let you see." Beatrice corrected her, her tone dripping with icy contempt. "I knew Marcus was drowning in debt. I saw the aggressive financial moves he was trying to make behind my back. I knew he was desperate for liquid cash to fund his pathetic, flashy lifestyle. But I also knew that if I simply fired him as my investment manager, you and Charles would endlessly defend him. You would have fought me in court, dragged my name through the mud, and petitioned for a legal conservatorship just to protect your precious golden boy." Beatrice stopped pacing and stood directly in front of the coffee table, towering over Marcus and Serena. "So, I decided to give him exactly what he wanted," Beatrice continued, her eyes narrowing into a dangerous squint. "I faked the aphasia. I locked myself in that conservatory and let my brain supposedly rot. I handed over the keys to my kingdom just to see exactly how far you would go. I wanted to see if there was any shred of decency left in you. Marcus, I wanted to see if you would manage the funds ethically, or if you would take advantage of a helpless old woman." Beatrice leaned forward, resting her knuckles on the glass coffee table right next to the black binder I had compiled. "And you took the bait with breathtaking greed." Beatrice snarled, her voice rising in volume. "You did not just mismanage my money. You systematically pillaged my life savings. You set up shell companies. You bought luxury cars. You colluded with your wife to launder my hard-earned wealth through the fine art market, completely confident that I would die in that corner before I ever noticed a single missing dime." Marcus tried to speak, tried to formulate a defense, but no words came out. He was completely defeated, crushed under the absolute terrifying weight of Beatrice's calculated wrath. My grandmother finally turned away from Marcus and looked directly at me. The harsh, lethal anger in her eyes melted away, replaced by an expression of profound, overwhelming respect. She walked around the glass table and stopped right in front of me. "I am so sorry I had to put you through this, Harper," Beatrice said softly, her tone completely shifting. "I hated watching them treat you like dirt. I hated sitting in that chair while they insulted your career and mocked your independence. But I needed a trigger, I needed someone entirely outside of Marcus's fraudulent ecosystem to execute the final phase of the sting operation. She placed a warm, steady hand on my shoulder. I used you to deliver the final nail in their coffin because you are the only one in this entire house with a spine. Beatrice declared, her voice ringing with absolute pride. I knew you were smart enough to recognize a distress signal. I knew your background in anti-money laundering compliance would force you to look at the routing numbers on that check. I knew you would never blindly hand the money over to Marcus. No matter how much Charles and Victoria screamed at you in that bank lounge, you have more integrity, more intelligence, and more courage in your little finger than this entire pathetic family possesses combined. My vision blurred with sudden, unexpected tears. For 34 years, I had been the family scapegoat. I had been called a disappointment, an ugly duckling, and a glorified paper pusher. My own parents had cut me out of their will just an hour ago for refusing to comply with their toxic demands. But hearing my grandmother, the woman who had orchestrated this brilliant multi-million-dollar federal sting, validate my worth in front of the people who had tried to destroy me, was the most profoundly satisfying moment of my entire life. Beatrice turned back to face Charles and Victoria, who were now trembling near the fireplace. Fully realizing the catastrophic scale of their failure, Harper is the true legacy of this family, Beatrice stated, her voice echoing with absolute finality. The rest of you are nothing but parasites. And tonight, the host is finally cutting you off. Mr. Vance gave a sharp nod to the federal agent standing at the edge of the living room. The lead FBI agent stepped forward. Pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his tactical belt, he grabbed Marcus by the shoulder, spinning him around and forcefully kicking his legs apart. Marcus offered no physical resistance. He simply stared blankly at the floor as the cold metal clamped tightly around his wrists. Marcus Hayes, the agent declared, his voice ringing with absolute authority. You are under arrest for federal wire fraud and the financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. While Marcus surrendered to the crushing reality of his consequences, Serena completely lost her mind. The IRS investigator stepped toward her holding a pair of heavy zip ties. Serena shrieked violently, thrashing her arms and kicking her expensive heels against the white leather sofa. Get your hands off me. Serena screamed, her flawless facade entirely shattered. I am a licensed gallery director. I did not do anything wrong. Marcus lied to me. 2 additional agents immediately swarmed the sofa, pinning Serena's arms behind her back with brutal efficiency. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering and multiple violations of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the investigator stated coldly, hauling Serena to her feet. Your gallery assets have already been seized. My mother collapsed onto the floor, wailing uncontrollably as the agents dragged Marcus and Serena toward the front door. Charles rushed forward, his face pale with terror. He grabbed Mr. Vance by the sleeve of his tailored suit, his previous arrogance replaced by desperate, pathetic pleading. Arthur, please stop this. Charles begged, his voice cracking. We can fix this quietly. We can pay the money back. Do not let them take my son. Mr. Vance calmly brushed my father's hand off his jacket. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a slim manila folder, pressing it directly into Charles's trembling chest. You cannot pay anything back, Charles. Mr. Vance replied with lethal precision. Open the folder. My father flipped the cover open, his eyes scanning the documents inside. His jaw slackened, and he staggered backward as if he had been physically struck. Did you really think Marcus financed his fraudulent shell companies and offshore transfers with air? Mr. Vance asked, his tone dripping with mockery. Your son needed massive collateral to secure those initial high-yield loans. He brought you the paperwork. And because you blindly trusted your golden child, you and Victoria approved every single fraudulent credit line. Victoria gasped, crawling across the rug to look at the papers in Charles's shaking hands. The banks are calling in the debts tomorrow morning. Vance concluded smoothly. Your luxury home is serving as the primary collateral. You will be foreclosed on by the end of the month. You are completely and permanently bankrupt. My mother let out a guttural wail, finally realizing the sheer inescapable gravity of Mr. Vance's words. The luxurious, untouchable life she had worshipped far above her own daughter was evaporating right before her eyes. Victoria collapsed onto the ruined Persian rug, the spilled champagne soaking deeply into the knees of her expensive designer trousers. She crawled across the floor toward me, her shaking hands desperately reaching out to grab the hem of my torn blazer. "Harper, please," my mother sobbed, her dark mascara running in thick ugly streaks down her pale face. "You have a good professional job. You make a steady salary. You have to help us pay off the banks. You can take out a loan or use your savings to stop the foreclosure. We are your parents. You cannot just let them throw us out on the street." I looked down at the pathetic woman who had just publicly disowned me, who had smiled while her golden son slapped me, and who had spent 34 years making me feel completely worthless. I did not feel a single ounce of pity. I deliberately stepped back, pulling my jacket entirely out of her desperate clutching grasp. "I am just a broke, glorified paper pusher. Remember?" I stated, my voice echoing with absolute freezing finality. "I do not have the funds to save you." I turned my back on my weeping parents and the federal agents, dismantling their lives. My grandmother gripped the handles of her wheelchair, but she did not sit back down. Instead, Beatrice walked proudly by my side, leaving the heavy mahogany doors wide open as we stepped out into the crisp, liberating night air together. 6 months later, the dust had completely settled. The federal justice system does not move quickly, but it moves with absolute crushing certainty. Marcus and Serena were both swiftly denied bail. They are currently sitting in federal holding facilities, facing a mandatory minimum of a decade in federal prison for wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering violations. Their entire fake empire was permanently seized by the government to pay restitution. Charles and Victoria lost the estate in less than 30 days, stripped of their stolen wealth and their precious society status. They were forced to move into a cramped, run-down, one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. My phone block list is full of their desperate, pleading voicemails, all of which I delete without ever listening. I am sitting in the corner office of my own newly opened compliance auditing firm. The space is bright, modern, and entirely funded by my own hard work, with a small angel investment from a very grateful grandmother. Beatrice is sitting across from my desk right now, sipping a black coffee and looking healthier than she has in a decade. They thought a slap would break me, but they forgot. When you corner a woman with nothing left to lose, she does not cry. She calculates. Has a family member ever underestimated your intelligence? Tell me your story in the comments and hit subscribe for more justice. The story of Harper and her family's catastrophic betrayal reveals a powerful truth about navigating toxic environments. Composure and self-reliance are the ultimate shields against manipulation. For decades, Harper desperately sought validation from parents who only valued the superficial success of her deceitful brother. When violently pushed to the absolute brink, she did not crumble into the emotional wreckage they eagerly anticipated. Instead, she leaned heavily into her professional expertise as a compliance investigator. This deeply resonates. teaching us that our inherent skills and logical clarity can gracefully dismantle the most elaborate webs of gaslighting, financial abuse, and fraud. Furthermore, family loyalty is often weaponized by those who view relationships as purely transactional. Harper's parents and brother weaponized guilt, public shaming, and physical intimidation to force her compliance. The profound lesson here is that sharing DNA does not obligate anyone to endure relentless emotional abuse. True liberation begins the very moment we stop trying to prove our inherent worth to people who are entirely committed to misunderstanding us. By refusing to sign away her rights and choosing to methodically expose the multi-million-dollar embezzlement, Harper shattered a generational cycle of enabling behavior. She recognized that her true value was not dictated by her parents' cruel metrics, but by her own uncompromising integrity and relentless hard work. Ultimately, the narrative demonstrates that the best response to pure malice is not blind vengeance, but absolute justice achieved through unshakable, permanent boundaries. Harper simply allowed her family's unchecked greed to become their own ultimate undoing, proving that walking away is the most powerful move imaginable. We must consistently recognize our own strength and never let fear keep us tethered. Take a moment today to evaluate the boundaries in your own life and bravely step away from anyone who diminishes your worth.